Thank you very much for that introduction. I'm mindful that I have kind of the slot before lunch, but this is a subject that I suppose we all have an interest in. So please think of your questions, and I'll leave some time for questions at the end as well. As I'm not a lawyer, I'm an economist, so again I will try and answer questions on some of the legal ramifications to the extent I've heard them from some of our interviews, but I'll try and stick to some of the economics where I can. Just so you know where I come from, we're a consultancy. We focus on a range of different things, but I lead the public policy section in the life sciences practice, and we do a lot of work assessing European Commission regulation or regulation the industry would like to change, and looking at the economic ramifications of this. So we were looking at Brexit very much in that context. This is a report that we've written, so it's an independent report which we've obviously updated as the debate has followed through. So what I'd like to go through, and I'll try and do this in 20 minutes, is a little bit of background on the work we did and point you towards it to the extent it's useful, interesting, hasn't been made out of date by some of the things that have changed. Talk a bit about what we've learned since the 23rd of June referendum. To be honest, we've learned some things, but there's an awful lot of questions we just don't know the answer to. So I'm going to caveat quite a lot of things by saying here are our assumptions, here's what we think could change. No one really knows. So some of the things we can infer, some of the things we can look at data on, some of the things are political decisions. So I will set that caveat up front. And then set out a structure for thinking about the impact of Brexit. And I suppose the only way we could kind of get our arms around all of the ramifications was to think along the activities of the life sciences value chain. Specifically, we were asked to think about biopharmaceuticals, so I don't have any answers on medical devices, but thinking about it from basic discovery through to market access. So I will take you through that journey and take you through my views of the impact that Brexit could have, and where that could be positive or negative. And then just I will try and draw some conclusions and to be a little bit provocative. So this was a project we did for FPIA, so it's the innovative pharmaceutical industry in Europe, and we were asked to look at the evidence as to the impact of Brexit, both on the UK industry, but also on the industry's activities in Europe. And we did this through a load of interviews. So some of this was discussion with pharmaceutical companies, some of this was SMEs, clinicians, researchers. So where possible, we've tried to put some data and evidence. It's a big, long, thick report if you're interested. But in some cases, this is speculation and thinking about scenarios. So this was released before the referendum and obviously used by some of the companies in structuring their thinking as well as FPIA's thinking. What have we learnt since that we need to take into account in updating our position, updating what we know? Well, we know some things. So Theresa May did the Lancaster House speech. We've got the white paper. So that's at least we've got some things that are written down as government position. So what do we know? Well, one, the UK will no longer be part of the single market. So this is known as hard Brexit. So we kind of know what it's not. We're not quite sure what it is. We know the UK will be looking to negotiate trade agreements, but this will be from outside of the single market. In terms of the UK's negotiating position, it's set out these 12 principles. I'm not going to go through those, but pick out the ones most interesting for our industry, the life sciences industry. And this is that the UK government is prioritising innovative industries. So it's looking to retain the UK's position as a hub for medical research, basic research, and innovative pharmaceutical development. So that's seen as a positive indication. And the government has made, some would say, a modest commitment to funding R&D. Interestingly, and I'll come back to this a bit later on, has made some commitments about research grants under Horizon 2020. Again, indicative of where the UK government is going to do. And then, perhaps most interestingly, the health minister has said, well, realistically, the position with EMA is going to be different post Brexit than before. Most people in this room would have assumed that anyway, but I think it's a bit of pragmatism and realism. And we've obviously got lots of comments from the other side at a much higher level in this negotiation from European politicians and the Commission saying, well, the deal has to be worse when you're outside of the EU than whether you're inside. Again, no surprise, but telling you what we all know is the UK is going to lose some things in this negotiation compared to the position it has today. So what does this mean? Well, it means in terms of the 3 scenarios we considered in our work, the Norway model, EEA membership, so effectively putting all of the European Commission rules into place and being a de facto member of the European single market, that's not going to happen post-Brexit. So we can look at really the other 2 forms here, the bilateral agreements of Switzerland and Canada, and a full break, a walking away of the UK because it can't get a negotiated agreement, falling back on the WTO rules. So at least the scenarios are narrowing to a degree. We can rule out everything stays the same post-Brexit scenario. You've also got a lot of statements by the UK government saying, well, this isn't going to be an established model. This is going to be a bespoke UK model. Yes, I hear that, but I also think we can learn quite a lot from what's going on in Canada, the CETA agreement, and the Swiss model. So let's maybe not put any more effort into understanding Norway. I'm sure Norway will be relieved, but there is still lessons to be had from Canada and Switzerland. What do I think those lessons are in a nutshell? Well, if you look at the Swiss agreement, they get some parts of the current situation the UK has. So it has mutual recognition of inspections on GMP, which obviously helps manufacturing in Switzerland. Switzerland obviously has quite a good relationship with Horizon 2020 and was participating as a full partner. So this is basic research grants. Now, post the referendum in Switzerland, that was restricted, again, indicative of some of the losses of the UK could face, and has regulatory cooperation between EMA and Swissmedic. That's what the UK is looking for. But Swissmedic has an entirely separate process. Registrations in Swissmedic happen 150 days after they happen at EMA. This is clearly very indicative of what might happen. What about CETA? Well, CETA, some of the SPC requirements that we just went through are very interesting. That's not just to the benefit of European-based activities, that's everyone. So the UK will benefit from those kinds of CETA-like arrangements. So we don't really think SPCs are an interesting part of the CETA arrangement, and obviously the UK will have a similar system to start with. What CETA's interested in is it has partial access to Horizon 2020, but actually gets no money. So it can collaborate but not get research funding. There is some agreements within CETA for the researchers moving within global pharmaceutical companies and some allowance within the immigration visa rules. That's interesting. The UK will be looking for that. And again, Health Canada has relationships with EMA, but an entirely separate process. As it happens, a standalone country, on average occurring 144 days longer than the EMA process. So what do we draw from this? Well, we draw from this that what the UK is going to get is going to be a set of conditions affecting the life sciences industry. It will be able to negotiate over some things, such as visas for research scientists. It will be able to look at the relationship with Horizon 2020, but it's going to lose other things. So there will be part losses along the value chain. So our research was really going through from basic discovery, product development, manufacturing, and market access, and saying where are we likely to lose in terms of the UK, and on the other side, where is the EU likely to lose from having a large pharmaceutical-based market such as the UK being as a separate market. And I'll go through these very, very quickly. So in terms of basic research, I think there is a real risk here. So the UK has done phenomenally well out of Horizon 2020. This is the program that followed the FP7 in terms of the support for basic research. The UK got 17% of funding, got 3 billion surplus over a four-year period in terms of funding from Horizon 2020. What's going to happen post-Brexit? Well, the UK will look to negotiate access to this, it seems very questionable whether it will be able to get full access learning from the Swiss model. What's interesting about the UK government's position post the white paper is it said it will support funding of existing Horizon 2020 agreements post-Brexit. Even so, if you talk to UK academia, they're really struggling to compete for research funding, not because of the lack of a commitment of funding, because of a lack of credibility as their coordinating role as a submitting body. So we're already seeing an impact on applications for Horizon 2020 pre-Brexit. The credibility of the UK strong science base as a coordinating partner in basic research will, in our view, suffer some damage. How much? We don't yet know. Product development. Well, one of the clear advantages that we've seen in terms of European regulation over the last 10 years has been a move from a clinical trials directive which was seen to be imperfect to an updated clinical trials directive which was seen to be much improved and clearly in the process of being implemented. At the point of Brexit, the UK is going to, especially given the Great Repeal Act, bring a lot of that into local legislation. Not much will change. But all of the evidence over time is that although there will be symmetry between clinical trials rules, they will not be exactly the same. So if you start to talk to companies about where they put their clinical trial programs, this will massively favour doing clinical trial programs within the rest of the EU rather than having a separate but comparable set of rules applying in the UK. The UK will lose its competitiveness in phase 3 trials. This seems again an inevitability. The extent of it is what we will see over the next couple of years. In terms of EMA, I think one of the things that we've learned from looking at all models is that even if the UK had an exactly comparable system of marketing authorization, and the presumption here is that the UK cannot continue to be a fully participating member of EMA, that seems to be the view of nearly everyone, apart from a small number of people in the UK, then even if the UK has exactly the same rules as EMA, even if it has a much accelerated model, and you can argue the Swiss Medic is a more efficient model of marketing authorization than EMA, you can argue, I think it's less true, that Health Canada is a more efficient model than EMA, you still have slower marketing authorizations than in the EU. Why? Because the pharmaceutical industry will prioritize getting access in the US and in the EU before its application to the MHRA. So this is an area that, from a regulatory law perspective, may be very interesting. I think it's actually missing the big picture here, which is that the pharmaceutical industry will just apply to the UK later than it applies to the EU, just because the UK is 3% of the world market. The EU is much bigger. This is a real patient impact, in our view, one that I don't think was communicated very well during the UK debates. The UK debates obviously have much bigger things to worry about than the life sciences industry, but this was a real patient impact, which I think was potentially could have been communicated better. Where will EMA be? We don't know. We think it's very unlikely to be in London. There's lots of competitors. I was talking at the coffee break about the advantages of Italy versus Stockholm versus Paris versus Dublin. This is clearly a huge competitive game at the moment between the different countries. We have some views as to where the logic would take it, but in the end it's going to be an economic and a political decision. One of the places it's not going to be, in our view, is London. That has a significant loss in terms of the UK. It actually might have quite a considerable loss in terms of the speed of marketing authorizations during the transition. And I think we actually have quite a significant risk about that, just in terms of the capacity that the MHRA is currently doing as a rapporteur in the system, and how that transition works as the location changes is actually just, on paper, maybe quite simple. In practice, I think will prove very difficult. Manufacturing and trade, I think as we saw in the last presentation, there's multilateral agreements that mean that there's no tariffs on API or finished products. This is a red herring for the life sciences industry. There's clearly a much bigger issue about mutual recognition of GMP standards, which clearly affects the the location of manufacturing, this is a really big deal. In the Swiss bilateral negotiation, this was one of the biggest issues for the pharmaceutical industry. Yes, but it was resolved. Many countries do have mutual recognition of GMP standards. People around this room will know much better than us. It seems unlikely in the extreme that the UK won't have this as one of its priorities, but it's a negotiation. So we don't really think the impact on manufacturing and trade is very large. There is quite a big impact at the bottom, and I spent a lot of last year talking to UK-based affiliates about the impact of Brexit, and one of the biggest issues for them was obviously the international workforce and what they will have to do post-Brexit. That's a huge issue, and obviously a huge recruitment issue for life sciences in the UK. Market access is a really weird one. So in its own right, market access may have become easier. It's a national regulation, so why is it changed? Parallel trade, which in our view as economists actually makes market access harder rather than easier, could stop post-Brexit. So you could argue market access will be beneficial for the UK post-Brexit. I don't think so. I think you've got to remember the point earlier on that we think marketing authorizations will probably happen 6 months later. So any benefits on this side, in something that's largely managed nowadays anyway, in terms of the impact of parallel trade, will be completely offset by actually seeing products on the market 12 months later. Now, it's also true that it takes a long time to get into the UK market because of NICE anyway, but I still think the delay in marketing authorization is a bigger impact than the benefits of parallel trade. NICE will lose a bit of influence in the world. I think quite a lot of people in the pharmaceutical industry will say hooray. From a purely objective perspective, I think there's good and bad in that. NICE are obviously a very well-respected, very analytical organization, so there is a bit of a loss in terms of the regulatory debate in the UK and in the EU. Some of these things, such as UNETA, are yet to really prove themselves as being a big impact, but they could be, and the UK's influence in some of those will have reduced. Okay, so in conclusion, I'm going to do the typical economist's answer to everything, is, well, I can make up positives and negatives for the UK all the way along the value chain. After looking at the numbers and spending some time doing this, I think the negatives are much bigger than the positives all the way along, particularly worrisome in terms of discovery and product development. There's a flip side to this, which has achieved so much less attention today, which is the impact on European Commission legislation. And again, you can make all the same arguments of positives and negatives all the way along the value chain. You might think UK losing means that the EU wins in some cases. I suppose our analysis of this is not really. We actually think that quite a lot of these are negatives on the European Union side in terms of losing the EU, not just in terms of its capability, but in terms of its role in legislation. So we actually come to the conclusion that the EU is going to lose from this as well. So from an economist's perspective, this isn't meant to be political. Our view before the referendum was that this was damaging to the life sciences industry. It's a global industry that looks for comparable rules across countries. This introduces unnecessary barriers. We can see very few advantages for participants. The big impact is uncertainty of what happens when Article 50 is finally invoked for the next 2 years until the post-Brexit world becomes clear. Now, we predicted that would lead to a stall in investments in the UK. Obviously, as with all other economic projections over the last couple of years, that's been wrong in the last 6 months. We've seen companies committing to the UK and investing in the UK. We still think the economic logic is right. We're going to stick to our guns. Uncertainty is bad. We will have a period of uncertainty which will be harmful to the UK. What we will come out through the agreement on the other side will be a mitigated damage. Not that big an impact for life sciences compared to some other industries, but will be negative both for the UK in life sciences and the EU. So our view for all of the optimism at the moment in the UK about making the best of it is that this is a lose-lose. We hope that the cost will be relatively small. Thank you.